The fluorescent lights hummed their tired song across the 23rd floor of Summit Enterprises, casting everything in that particular shade of corporate sterile Marcus Brennan had come to know as intimately as his own reflection. 1 in the morning Friday night bleeding into Saturday, and the executive suites lay empty except for the ghosts of decisions made earlier that day. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart past glass-walled conference rooms where millions had been won and lost in PowerPoint slides, past mahogany desks that cost more than his car, past motivational posters proclaiming everyone mattered. He'd learned years ago those posters weren't meant for men like him. His cartwheels squeaked against polished marble as he approached the corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's glittering sprawl. Catherine Stone's domain. The CEO's inner sanctum where ordinary janitors weren't supposed to linger, but Marcus had developed a habit over 7 years. Just 60 seconds, no more. Long enough to look at the photograph on her desk, the one facing away from visitors, meant only for her eyes during long nights of solitary work. The picture showed a younger Catherine, maybe 16, standing beside a man in his 60s, wearing a gray uniform identical to the one Marcus wore now. The man's name tag read James Stone, and beneath it, Lincoln High School Custodial Services. Catherine's father, a janitor who'd worked himself to death according to the memorial plaque in the building's main lobby that Marcus passed every night. Marcus's hand drifted to his chest fingers, finding the shape of his own father's dog tags beneath the gray polyester. William Brennan Facilities Maintenance dead at 52 from a workplace accident that could have been prevented if someone had listened to his safety concerns. But nobody listened to men who mopped floors and fixed broken things in the dark. Sometimes the invisible are the ones who see most clearly. They observe while everyone else merely glances. He whispered the words into the empty office, a ritual he'd developed over the years, then moved on. 4 more floors to clean before his shift ended at 2 in the morning, before he could drive home to the Southside apartment where Mrs. Eleanor Callahan watched over Isla, his 9-year-old daughter who should have been asleep hours ago but never was. The girl inherited her father's restless mind, always reading, always thinking, always believing. The world operated on logic and fairness. Marcus envied her that innocence, even as he worked to preserve it. The elevator took him down to 15 where his real work began. Emptying trash bins filled with the detritus of important people's important days. Half-eaten salads from restaurants that charged $20 for lettuce. Discarded reports representing months of someone's labor, now crumpled and forgotten. Post-it notes with complaints scrawled in impatient handwriting, too cold, too hot, flickering light in northeast corner, bathroom sink drips. He collected each note, photographed it with his personal phone, logged it in the spreadsheet he maintained at home. 7 years of data. Temperature fluctuations by floor and season. Equipment failures cataloged by type and frequency. Energy consumption patterns that revealed inefficiencies nobody else noticed, because nobody else spent their nights in these buildings feeling the rhythm of systems straining under neglect. The laptop waiting in his apartment contains 73,000 rows of observations. HVAC zones mapped to the decimal point. Electrical loads tracked across time. Plumbing issues documented with the precision of a doctoral thesis, except Marcus Brennan had barely graduated high school, had learned everything he knew from his father, and from 7 years of paying attention while the world ignored him. He'd thought about presenting his findings once, maybe 3 years back. Drafted a proposal suggesting the company could save $40,000 annually just by replacing ballasts on the 11th floor, preventing the migraine-inducing flicker that drove the accounting department to call in sick more often than any other group. But the idea of walking into a manager's office, a janitor, presuming to know better than people with engineering degrees, had paralyzed him. The proposal still sat in his laptop's drafts folder, gathering digital dust. Who listens to invisible men? His phone buzzed just past 11:15. Isla's name lighting the screen. Marcus smiled despite the ache in his lower back, despite knowing he still had 4 floors and 3 hours ahead of him. The girl's voice came through sleep, rough and urgent. "Dad, I can't sleep." Worry spiked through him, the ever-present fear that lived in every single parent's chest. "What's wrong, bug nightmare?" A pause, then excitement rather than distress colored her words. "No, I had a good dream. You were wearing a nice suit and everyone was clapping. The party tonight, you should go." Marcus stopped his cart beside a window overlooking the city, Chicago's lights reflecting off Lake Michigan in the distance. The company holiday party. He'd heard executives discussing it for weeks, their voices carrying through ventilation ducts and thin walls. An annual celebration on the 20th floor, champagne and catered food and networking opportunities for people whose careers mattered. Bug that's for executives. I'm not invited. The words came out more bitter than he intended. Isla heard it. But you work there. Why can't you go? The question hung between them, simple and devastating. Why couldn't the janitor attend the company party? Because he wore gray instead of suits. Because his hands were calloused from mop handles instead of soft from signing contracts. Because the world had drawn invisible lines that people like him weren't supposed to cross, and even thinking about crossing them felt presumptuous. It's complicated, sweetheart. Isla made that sound she always made when adults gave non-answers, half sigh and half protest. That's what you say when you mean the rules are stupid, but I have to follow them anyway. Too smart, this daughter of his. Too observant. She'd figured out by age 7 that her father's world operated on different principles than the ones in her library books, where hard work was rewarded and good people prospered. Reality was messier, less fair, and Marcus had spent 9 years trying to shield her from that truth while also preparing her for it, an impossible balance like everything else about single parenthood. You should go, Dad. I have a feeling something good will happen. The certainty in her voice made his chest tight. Isla believed in patterns and cause and effect in a universe that rewarded courage. She'd probably been reading those fantasy novels again, the ones where ordinary people discovered they were secretly special, where acts of bravery led to transformation and recognition. I'll think about it, Bug. Now you need to sleep. School tomorrow. He could practically hear her smile through the phone. Promise you'll really think about it, not just say you will. I promise. They exchanged I love yous, and the line went quiet, leaving Marcus alone with fluorescent lights and the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. He resumed his route, but Isla's words followed him through the 14th floor, the 13th down into the mechanical spaces where he could hear the building's bones creaking. The party would be starting soon. 9:30 now, music probably already playing, people already networking and drinking and performing the elaborate dance of corporate hierarchy. Marcus had seen these events from a distance for a glimpse through doorways while collecting trash overheard in elevator conversations. They sounded exhausting, all that forced enthusiasm and strategic socializing. He was emptying a recycling bin on 14 when voices drifted up through an emergency stairwell, younger executives taking a smoking break despite the November cold. A woman's laugh sharp with mockery. Did you see Johnson trying to pitch his quarterly projections while Victoria was clearly trying to enjoy her drink? No sense of timing. A male voice responded, Johnson has no sense, period. But he's right to worry. I heard the restructuring rumors. Some departments getting consolidated after New Year's. Marcus's hands stilled on the bin liner. Restructuring, consolidation, corporate euphemisms for layoffs, for people losing jobs, for lives disrupted by spreadsheet decisions made in rooms like the ones he cleaned. Another voice chimed in, well, whoever survives better make themselves visible tonight. FaceTime with the CEO. Let her see you're indispensable. Their laughter faded as they headed back to the party, leaving Marcus standing in an empty hallway with a garbage bag and a decision crystallizing in his mind. If layoffs were coming, facilities would be first on the chopping block. Janitors were fungible, easily replaced the definition of non-essential, despite keeping every system running. He thought of Isla, of the medical debt still crushing them from her appendectomy 2 years ago, of how he couldn't afford even a week without income. Isla's voice echoed in memory, something good will happen. The party was on 20, his cart was on 14. Between them lay 6 floors and a gulf of social stratification he'd never dared cross. But his supervisor wouldn't check on him for another hour, and 20 was technically on his road. He was supposed to clean it after the party ended, but that didn't mean he couldn't go up early. Just to see. Just to prove to his daughter he'd tried. Marcus left his cart in a supply closet and took the service elevator, up, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that felt ridiculous. It was just a party. He wasn't crashing the White House. But as the doors opened onto the 20th floor, music and laughter washing over him like a wave, his courage wavered. The conference center had been transformed. Gone were the fluorescent lights, replaced by warm golden fixtures that made everything glow like honey. Long tables he'd helped event staff set up that afternoon now groaned under food. He couldn't name artful arrangements that looked too beautiful to eat. 200 people in designer clothes moved through the space wine glasses, catching light conversation, flowing in that particular rhythm of people who belonged. Marcus stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of every detail marking him as wrong. His gray uniform with Summit Enterprises embroidered over the pocket. His worn sneakers that had already walked 7 miles tonight. The smell of industrial cleaner that probably clung to his clothes despite his best efforts. Nobody looked at him. Not because he was invisible, he'd grown used to that, but because he genuinely didn't belong here, and everyone knew it, including him. A young woman in a black dress materialized beside him, clipboard in hand, professional smile firmly in place. Sarah Winters, one of the event coordinators he'd seen earlier. She clearly didn't remember him. "Can I help you?" The question landed like a challenge rather than an offer. Marcus tried to find words, found his throat dry. "I'm Marcus. I work here. I just thought—" Her smile never wavered, but something shifted in her eyes. Pity maybe, or discomfort. "The service staff entrance is around back. If you're with catering, you'll want to check in with the kitchen manager." "No, I'm not catering. I work for Summit. Facilities." She glanced at his uniform and understanding dawned. Not the good kind. "Oh, well, this event is really more for corporate leadership teams and their guests. But I'm sure there's something nice planned for facilities staff at a different time." There wasn't. There never was. Marcus knew this with the certainty of 7 years' experience. The holiday party was for people who mattered, and men who emptied their trash didn't make that list. "I understand. Sorry to have bothered you." He was reaching for the elevator button, face burning with humiliation, when voices nearby cut through his embarrassment. "Oh my God, is she seriously crying?" The words came from a cluster of younger executives near the bar, their faces lit by phone screens. Marcus glanced over and saw them looking toward the far corner of the room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Someone else spoke, careful and quiet. "Someone should do something." "Are you kidding? That's Catherine Stone. You don't approach the CEO when she's having a moment. Career suicide." "Is she drunk?" "Completely. Been at that bar for an hour. Marcus tried to talk to her earlier, and she almost bit his head off." Curiosity pulled Marcus forward a few steps, just enough to see past the crowd. There, seated alone at the far end of the bar, was a woman in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Marcus's car, dark hair coming loose from its elegant updo. Even from this distance, he could see the unsteady way she reached for her wine glass, the mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Catherine Stone, the CEO, the woman whose name was on the building, whose decisions shaped thousands of lives, including his own. Marcus had seen her exactly 3 times in 7 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by an entourage of assistants and executives, always moving with the kind of purpose that came from knowing exactly where you belonged in the world. She didn't look purposeful now. She looked drunk and alone and utterly abandoned in a room full of her own employees. "Where's her driver?" She gave him the night off. Apparently she was planning to leave with the Hendersons, but they left an hour ago without telling her. Typical. Everyone wants FaceTime when she's powerful and put together. The moment she shows vulnerability, suddenly we're all very busy elsewhere. Laughter rippled through the group, nervous and cruel in equal measure. Marcus watched as they pulled out phones, angles shifting to capture the CEO in her moment of weakness. By tomorrow, this would be office gossip. By Monday, it would be a cautionary tale. By next month, it would be a joke. He should leave. This wasn't his problem, wasn't his world. Getting involved would be overstepping, presumptuous, potentially job-ending. He was the janitor, the invisible man, the person who existed in margins, while people like Catherine Stone commanded the center. But then she lifted her head, and for just a moment, her eyes found his across the room. She didn't recognize him. How could she? They'd never spoken, never existed in the same sphere. But in that brief second of eye contact, Marcus saw something that made his chest ache with recognition. She was invisible too. Not invisible in the way he was ignored by choice, rendered irrelevant by circumstance, but invisible in a different, equally painful way. Surrounded by people and utterly alone, powerful and completely unseen. The kind of invisible that came from being so elevated that you stopped being human in other people's eyes. Isla's voice echoed again. Something good will happen. This wasn't good. This was messy and complicated and absolutely none of his business. But as Marcus watched Catherine Stone sitting alone at that bar, as he watched executives whisper and phones come out and absolutely no one stepped forward to help, he thought about his daughter, who believed in patterns, in fairness, in the possibility that courage mattered. He thought about the photograph on Catherine's desk, her father in his janitor's uniform. He thought about his own father who died believing hard work and decency counted for something. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be when Isla looked at him. And then before he could talk himself out of it, Marcus Brennan walked across the room toward the most powerful person in the building. Every step felt like walking through water. Conversations quieted as he passed. He felt eyes on him, felt the weight of his gray uniform like a brand. The event coordinator started to move toward him, probably to escort him out, but Marcus kept walking. Catherine didn't look up as he approached. Up close, he could see the exhaustion beneath expensive makeup, the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for her glass. The bartender, a young guy who looked deeply uncomfortable, was making himself busy at the far end of the bar. Marcus's voice came out quieter than he'd intended, but she heard it. Ms. Stone, her head lifted slowly, unfocused eyes trying to find him in the dim light. Who? Do I know you? No, ma'am. I'm Marcus Brennan. I work here. She gestured vaguely at the room movements imprecise. Everyone here works here. That's why it's called a company party. The words were slightly slurred, her usual sharp precision softened by wine. Marcus glanced back at the watching crowd, then made a decision. He lowered his voice, speaking for her ears only. I think maybe you've had a long night. Can I help you get home safely? Catherine's laugh was bitter and startling. Home safely, that's very thoughtful, but I'm fine. Perfectly fine. See, she lifted her wine glass in a toast to no one sloshing a little onto the bar. Picture of professionalism. Marcus kept his voice gentle. I don't doubt it, ma'am, but even professionals deserve to get home safe. Your driver? I gave Jonathan the night off. His daughter's in a school play. She said it like an accusation, like kindness was something to be ashamed of. Very magnanimous of me, wasn't it? And then the Hendersons, who swore they'd give me a ride, left without me because Greg got a call about some emergency with his portfolio. She wasn't just drunk, Marcus realized. She was hurt and trying very hard to pretend she wasn't. Then let me drive you. My car's not fancy, but it runs. I can have you home in 20 minutes. Catherine finally focused on him properly, taking in the gray uniform with its embroidered name tag. Your facilities. Night shift janitor. Yes, ma'am. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Why would you? She stopped, shook her head. No, thank you, but no. I'll call a car service, or I'll walk. It's only… She squinted at the windows as if trying to calculate distance. Far, it's far, but I have excellent shoes for walking. She tried to stand swayed dangerously, and Marcus instinctively reached out to steady her elbow. Her skin was warm beneath his hand, and he could feel how carefully she was holding herself together, all that formidable control barely containing the mess beneath. So, Stone, with respect, those shoes aren't going to get you to the parking lot, let alone home. And it's December. It's freezing outside. I'm aware of the temperature, Marcus. His name sounded strange in her mouth, like she was testing the weight of it. I'm drunk, not stupid. I never said you were stupid. I said you were drunk and alone, and I'm offering to help. Why? The question was sharp, cutting through the wine-softened edges. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. If anything, She gestured vaguely at him, at his uniform, at the invisible gulf between their positions. I owe you. Your paycheck, your health care, your… She trailed off, lost in whatever thought had seized her. Marcus could feel the room watching them, could practically hear the furious texting happening in every corner. This was going to be tomorrow's gossip, regardless of what he did. The only question was whether it would be the story of the janitor who overstepped his bounds, or the story of the janitor who did the right thing when no one else would. Isla's face rose in his mind. What kind of man did he want to be when she looked at him? The words came simple and true. Because someone should, and everyone else seems to be busy. Catherine stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Not of Marcus himself, but of something he represented, something she'd been missing for a very long time. Finally, she nodded, the movement small and uncertain. Okay, okay. Getting her to the elevator required careful navigation. Marcus kept one hand lightly on her elbow, guiding more than supporting, trying to preserve what dignity he could for both of them. The crowd parted like water, silent and staring. The event coordinator tried to intercept them halfway across the room. Sir, I don't think Marcus's voice came out firmer than he intended. Ms. Stone isn't feeling well. I'm taking her home. Perhaps we should let the woman have some privacy. He regretted the edge in his tone immediately. The coordinator was just doing her job, same as him. But right now his job was getting Catherine Stone out of this room before the phones captured anything else. The elevator ride down was silent, except for the mechanical hum of descent. Catherine leaned against the back wall, eyes closed, breathing carefully. Marcus stood near the doors, giving her space, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. She spoke suddenly, the voice quiet. What floor do you clean? The question caught him off guard. Ma'am, what floor? Which one's yours? I rotate. Monday through Wednesday, I do 14 through 18. Thursday and Friday, I do the upper floors, 19 through 23. 7 years. It wasn't a question. Catherine's eyes were still closed, but her voice carried certainty. You've been here 7 years, 3 months. Marcus Brennan, night maintenance. I see the names. Loyalty bonus reports. I know everyone who's been here more than 5 years. Marcus turned to look at her, surprised. I didn't think that I paid attention to janitors. She laughed soft and sad. I know the names. I sign off on them. I don't see the people. I see the positions, the line items. Her eyes opened, finding his. But you see people, don't you? That's why you're here instead of walking away like everyone else. The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage before Marcus could answer. December air rushed in cold enough to make both of them flinch. His Honda Civic was parked in the far corner under a flickering light that maintenance kept meaning to fix. The car looked even more pathetic than usual next to the BMWs and Mercedes that filled the executive spaces. Catherine stopped when she saw it, and for a terrible moment Marcus thought she might refuse. But then she spoke, and her voice held something that might have been wonder. It's very honest. Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. It gets me where I need to go. He unlocked the passenger door, cleared away the library books Isla had left on the seat, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, well-worn and beloved, and helped Catherine settle in. She moved carefully like someone negotiating with the gravity, and when she was finally seated, she let out a long breath. Seatbelt. The reminder came out gentler than he intended. Catherine fumbled with it, fingers clumsy, and Marcus reached over to help. His hands brushed hers briefly. Her fingers were cold despite the building's warmth. He climbed into the driver's seat, and the car's interior light illuminated them both in its harsh glow. This close, Marcus could see the fine lines around Catherine's eyes, the exhaustion beneath expensive makeup. She looked older than she did in company photos and somehow more real. Where to? She rattled off an address in Riverside Heights, the kind of neighborhood where houses had gates and gardeners and price tags that made Marcus's apartment rent look like pocket change. Of course, that's where she lived. Where else would the CEO of Summit Enterprises live? The car started on the second try. It always did, faithful despite its age, and Marcus pulled out of the garage into the December night. Chicago streets were quiet at this hour. Holiday lights reflecting off wet pavement, storefronts, dark except for their security lights. They drove in silence for the first few minutes. Marcus kept the radio off, unsure what music would be appropriate for this surreal situation. Catherine stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. Do you have children? The question surprised him, personal in a way their interaction hadn't been. Yes, a daughter, Isla. She's 9. 9. Catherine turned to look at him, and something in her expression had softened. That's a good age. Still believes in things. She does. Too many things, probably. She thinks the world is basically fair. That good things happen to good people. And you don't believe that? Marcus considered the question as he merged onto the highway, choosing his words carefully. I believe the world is what you make of it, and sometimes what you make isn't enough. but you keep trying anyway. For them. For her. For her. Catherine was quiet for a moment then. Her mother left when Isla was 3. Said she didn't sign up for this life, and I guess she was right. We were young, thought we could make it work on love and determination. Turns out the world requires more than that. I'm sorry. The sympathy in her voice sounded genuine, stripped of the professional polish he'd expect from a CEO consoling an employee. It's okay. We're okay. It's not the life I planned, but he thought about Isla's smile, the way she hugged him before bed every night, how she still believed he could do anything. It's enough. It has to be. More silence. The highway stretched ahead of them, nearly empty. Marcus's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind was racing. Tomorrow he'd have to face the consequences of this decision. The whispers, the questions, maybe even disciplinary action for overstepping his bounds. But tonight, right now, he was just a man driving another human being home safely. Catherine's voice cut through his thoughts. Why did you help me? I told you because someone should. But why you? You could have walked away. Everyone else did. She turned to face him fully now, and despite the whine, her gaze was sharp. The people who work directly for me, who depend on me for their careers, their livelihoods, they all saw me there and chose to protect themselves instead. So why would you, someone I've never spoken to, someone who has nothing to gain and potentially a lot to lose, why would you step forward? Marcus drove for a moment before answering, the memory rising clear and painful. A few months ago, Isla got sick at school. High fever. They called me in the middle of my shift. I left work early, first time in 7 years, and rushed to get her. But my car wouldn't start. Dead battery. I'm standing in that parking garage panicking because my daughter needs me and I can't get to her. He paused, seeing it again. The fear. The helplessness. This guy I'd never seen before, visiting some executive for a meeting. He saw me trying to jumpstart the car. He could have kept walking. Had no reason to help some janitor having a bad day, but he stopped, helped me with his cables, followed me to the school to make sure I got there okay. And I asked him why. Why help me? He said, because I hope someone would do the same for me. Marcus met Catherine's eyes briefly before returning his attention to the road. So when I saw you tonight and alone, everyone else walking away, I thought about that stranger. And I thought about the kind of man I want to be when my daughter looks at me. Catherine was quiet for so long, Marcus thought maybe she'd fallen asleep. But when he glanced over, her eyes were open, staring at something he couldn't see. Then she spoke, and her voice carried a weight that made the car feel smaller. My father was a janitor, school custodian at Lincoln High, worked nights just like you. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. He knew this story, had read it on the memorial plaque 1,000 times. But hearing it from her raw and unpolished hit different. I'd wait up for him sometimes, even though my mother said I shouldn't. He'd come home exhausted, smelling like floor cleaner and cafeteria food, and he'd still ask me about my day, still help with my homework, still tell me I could be anything I wanted. Her voice cracked slightly. He died of a heart attack when I was 16, collapsed in the middle of mopping the gym floor. They found him the next morning. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but Catherine continued as if she hadn't heard. Everyone at school sent flowers. The principal gave a lovely speech about his dedication. Then they hired someone else and forgot about him within a week. Her hands clenched in her lap. I promised myself that day that I'd never be invisible like he was. I'd be so successful, so powerful that people would have to see me, have to acknowledge me. You succeeded. Catherine's laugh was bitter. Did I? I built an empire, Marcus. Summit Enterprises is worth billions. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And tonight, when I needed help, every single person who works for me, who benefits from my success, chose to protect themselves instead. She turned to look at him, and in the dim light from passing street lamps, he could see tears on her cheeks. I was just as invisible as my father ever was. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. What could he say? That power and visibility weren't the same thing. That being seen required vulnerability, not just success. All of it felt inadequate in the face of her pain. They exited the highway onto tree-lined streets where houses sat behind walls and gates. Catherine directed him through the quiet neighborhood, until they reached a driveway with an iron gate. She produced a remote from her purse and the gate swung open to reveal a house that looked like something from a magazine. Modern lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, landscaping that probably required a full-time staff. Marcus pulled up to the front door and put the car in park. The interior light clicked on as Catherine opened her door, and for a moment they both sat there, neither quite ready to end this strange intersection of their separate worlds. Catherine spoke first, her hand on the door handle. "Thank you for the ride, for..." She gestured vaguely at everything and nothing. "Everything. You're welcome. Will you be okay from here?" "I'll be fine. The security system knows me even drunk." She stepped out, then paused, bending down to look back into the car. Marcus noticed her eyes were clearer now, more focused than they'd been at the party. "Marcus Brennan, your father, William Brennan. I looked him up once years ago when I was researching Summit's contractor history. He worked briefly at Lincoln High, did HVAC maintenance there in the late 90s. Marcus's breath caught. He hadn't known that. Hadn't known his father and Catherine's had worked in the same building. Catherine continued, her voice soft. "There was a note in my father's memorial service records. Someone named William Brennan attended. Left a card that said, 'James was a good man who deserved better. We all do.'" She straightened up, looking down at Marcus through the open door. 20 years later, his son drives me home when everyone else walks away. Maybe the world's not as random as it seems. Before Marcus could respond, before he could process what she was saying, Catherine spoke again. "Your daughter Isla, she's lucky to have you." Then she closed the door and walked to her house, slightly unsteady but determined. Marcus watched until she was safely inside, lights blooming to life in the windows. Only then did he pull out his phone and send a quick text to Isla, even though she should be asleep. "Went to the party like you said. Interesting night. Tell you about it tomorrow. Love you." The response came almost immediately. "I knew something good would happen. Love you too, Dad." Marcus smiled and pocketed his phone. He backed out of the driveway, the gate closing behind him with a soft clang, and headed home to his own modest apartment across town. He had no idea that the good thing Isla predicted was only beginning. No idea that in less than 12 hours, Catherine Stone would change his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. For now, he was just tired, ready for his shift to end, ready to go home and sleep before Isla woke up for school. Just an invisible man who'd made one small choice, unaware that sometimes the smallest choices cast the longest shadows. The city lights blurred past his windows as he drove south, leaving Riverside Heights behind. His phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Isla. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Andrew Blake, Ms. Stone's executive assistant. Ms. Stone has requested your presence at her office Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Please confirm receipt." Marcus pulled over, staring at the message. His heart hammered against his ribs. Monday morning, the CEO's office. This could be anything. A thank you? A reprimand? A termination for inappropriate contact with a senior executive? He thought about not responding, about pretending he never got the message. But that was the coward's way, and he'd just spent an hour being brave for Isla's sake. Confirmed, he typed back. The response came within seconds. "Excellent. Security will be expecting you." Marcus sat in his idling car on a quiet street in a neighborhood where he didn't belong, holding a phone that had just summoned him to either salvation or destruction, and he laughed. The sound came out shaky, hovering somewhere between hysteria and relief. "Something good will happen," Isla had said. His daughter who believed in patterns and fairness and the possibility that courage mattered. Maybe she was right. Maybe stepping forward when everyone else stepped back could lead somewhere other than disaster. Or maybe Monday morning he'd lose his and everything would fall apart. Either way, he'd know in less than 48 hours. Marcus pulled back onto the road and drove home through streets that were familiar in the way only night shift workers knew them. The city looked different at 2 in the morning, quieter and more honest. Streetlights illuminated empty intersections. 24-hour diners glowed like beacons for the displaced and dispossessed. A police cruiser passed, going the opposite direction, the officer lifting 2 fingers in acknowledgement of another soul awake when the world slept. He parked in his building's lot, climbed 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again, and let himself into the apartment as quietly as possible. Mrs. Callahan was asleep on the couch, a paperback romance novel open on her chest. Marcus covered her with a blanket and left cash on the kitchen table. $40 more than he usually paid, but after tonight, generosity felt necessary. Isla's door was cracked open the way she liked it, and Marcus stood in the doorway watching his daughter sleep. She'd kicked off her covers as usual, one arm hanging off the edge of the bed completely at peace in the way only children could be. The nightlight shaped like a crescent moon cast soft shadows across her face. He thought about Catherine Stone in her mansion alone with her success and her memories of a father who'd worked himself to death. He thought about his own father who died believing hard work mattered even when nobody noticed. He thought about the memorial plaque in Summit's lobby and the 7 years he'd spent being invisible in those hallways. Something good will happen. Marcus kissed his fingers and pressed them gently to Isla's doorframe, a ritual he'd started when she was a baby and never quite stopped. Then he went to his own room, set his alarm for 7 so he could make her breakfast before school, and lay down in clothes that smelled like industrial cleaner and other people's offices. Sleep came slowly, his mind replaying the night. Catherine's eye finding his across that crowded room. The weight of her in his passenger seat. The way she'd said his name like it mattered. The revelation about their fathers, about connections neither of them had known existed. When sleep finally pulled him under, Marcus dreamed of his father in a gray uniform standing beside James Stone, in an identical outfit, both men smiling like they were in on some cosmic joke the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. He woke to his alarm screaming and sunlight streaming through thin curtains, Saturday morning arriving whether he was ready or not. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Mrs. Callahan was already up, probably had been for an hour. Marcus dragged himself out of bed, muscles protesting, and shuffled into the bathroom to splash cold water on his face. The man in the mirror looked tired. Older than 38, worn down by night shifts and single parenthood, and 7 years of being overlooked. But his eyes held something new this morning. Not quite hope, too fragile for that. More like possibility. Monday at 9, he'd walk into Catherine Stone's office and learn whether courage led to transformation or just to unemployment. But that was 48 hours away. Right now, he had a daughter to feed and a weekend to serve and a story to tell that Isla wouldn't quite believe. Marcus dried his face, squared his shoulders, and walked into the kitchen where Mrs. Callahan was already making pancakes. And Isla was setting the table with that concentrated seriousness 9-year-olds brought to important tasks. His daughter looked up as he entered, and her face split into a grin. You actually went to the party." The pure joy in her voice made everything, the humiliation of being turned away, the risk of helping Catherine, the uncertainty of Monday, worth it. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down, accepting the coffee Mrs. Callahan pressed into his hands. "I did bug, and you were right. Something happened." Isla bounced in her seat, impatient for details. "What? Tell me everything." So Marcus told her a simplified version edited for age appropriateness. About going to the party, about seeing someone who needed help, about making a choice to be kind when it would have been easier to walk away. He left out the drinking and the desperation and the way Catherine had cried in his car. Those parts weren't for 9-year-olds. But he told her about the connection, about learning that sometimes the smallest acts of decency rippled outward in ways you couldn't predict. About how her grandfather had known Catherine's father, about how the world was smaller and stranger than it seemed. Isla absorbed every word, her eyes wide with that particular intensity children brought to stories that confirmed their view of how things should work. When he finished, she reached across the table and took his hand. "See, I told you something good would happen. And it's not over yet, is it? Because the CEO wants to see you Monday. That's the next good thing." Mrs. Callahan set a plate of pancakes in front of each of them, her weathered face creasing into a smile. "Your daughter's right, Marcus. You did good. And Monday, whatever happens, you'll handle it. You always do." Marcus looked at these two people, an old woman who'd become family, despite no blood connection, a young girl who still believed in fairness and magic and the power of courage, and felt something settle in his chest. Whatever Monday brought, he wouldn't face it alone. They ate pancakes together while morning light filled the small kitchen, and for a few hours, Marcus let himself forget about CEO offices and uncertain futures. He was just a father having breakfast with his daughter, grateful for small mercies and the people who loved him despite knowing all his flaws. But Monday was coming, inevitable as sunrise, and with it would come answers to questions Marcus hadn't known he was asking. Questions about who he was, who he could be, and whether 7 years of invisible work had been seen after all by the one person who mattered most. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train, dragging Marcus from 3 hours of restless sleep into a reality where consequences waited. The alarm hadn't even finished its first cycle when his phone buzzed with a text message, the screen's glow harsh in pre-dawn darkness. Warren Bennett's name appeared above a message that made Marcus's stomach drop. Need to see you. My office 6 a.m. before your shift. This can't wait. The weekend had passed in a blur of anxiety barely concealed from Isla. Saturday afternoon at the library, her chattering about the party and what it might mean, Marcus nodding along while his mind raced through scenarios. Sunday morning pancakes with Mrs. Callahan, the old woman squeezing his shoulder and telling him everything would work out, her confidence more wishful than certain. Sunday evening homework, help Isla's math problems, a welcome distraction from the mathematics of his own situation. One janitor plus one CEO plus one moment of kindness equals what exactly? Now, Monday was here, unforgiving in its punctuality. Marcus showered in water that never got quite hot enough, dressed in his gray uniform one more time, and left the apartment while Isla still slept. Mrs. Callahan had agreed to handle morning duties, sensing this was important, even if Marcus couldn't explain exactly why. The drive to Summit felt longer than usual, every red light a small eternity, Chicago's streets beginning to wake as workers started their commutes. Warren Bennett's office occupied a corner of the third floor, a cramped space buried under maintenance reports and supply requisitions. The man himself sat behind a desk that had seen better decades, his 54 years carved into a face that usually carried easy warmth. This morning that warmth was nowhere to be found. Marcus knocked on the open door, and Warren looked up with an expression that confirmed every fear. Close it. Sit down. The chair creaked under Marcus's weight, protesting in harmony with his nerves. Warren leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin, measuring silence, stretching between them like a wire pulled taut. Finally, 6 phone calls, Marcus, 6, before the sun even thought about coming up. Executives asking who the hell you are, saying you made inappropriate advances toward Miss Stone Friday night. The accusation landed like a fist to the gut, despite Marcus having anticipated it. Knowing it was coming didn't make it hurt less. That's not what happened. I drove her home safely. That's all. Warren's jaw worked, muscles tensing beneath weathered skin. You put yourself alone in a car with the CEO while she was intoxicated. You understand the liability, the optics, every HR policy you violated. Would you rather I left her there, drunk and abandoned, with people filming her on their phones? The question came out sharper than Marcus intended, frustration bleeding through his careful control. Warren's expression flickered, sympathy warring with professional obligation. I would rather you'd called her assistant, her security detail. Anyone whose actual job description includes handling executive matters. He leaned forward, and now the sympathy won. Look, I get it. You're a good guy, Marcus. You see someone in trouble and you want to help. But there are lines you don't cross when you're in your position and they're in theirs. Lines that exist for reasons. Marcus felt anger rising hot and unfamiliar in his chest. What position? The one where I'm supposed to be invisible, where I only exist when someone needs their office cleaned. The position where you have a daughter depending on you and bills that won't stop coming and a job you can't afford to lose because you decided to play hero. The words hit home because they were true. Warren wasn't being cruel, he was being realistic, practical. Everything Marcus had tried to be for 7 years until Friday night, when Isla's voice had convinced him to be brave instead. Warren pulled a folder from his desk drawer, official forms already half completed. Suspended pending investigation. Still paid, but you're not to come into the building until HR clears you. Could be 3 days, could be longer. Marcus's hands clenched on the armrests. This was it then. The consequences. Catherine had warned him about the price of crossing lines that weren't supposed to be crossed. I understand. Do you? Warren's voice softened. Because this isn't like showing up late or calling in sick. This is about boundaries between someone 40 levels above you on the org chart. Even if your intentions were pure, and I believe they were, it doesn't mean there won't be fallout. Marcus stood accepting the suspension forms with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. At the door he paused, looking back at the man who'd supervised him for 7 years without complaint. Warren, let me ask you something. If it was your wife sitting there drunk and alone, everyone walking past pretending not to see, would you want someone like me to walk past too? Warren's face crumpled slightly, the professional mask slipping to reveal the decent man underneath. No, I want someone to help, but that doesn't make this easier, Marcus. The drive home took 15 minutes through streets now fully awake with Monday morning traffic. Marcus pulled into his building's lot at 7:30, 2 hours earlier than Isla expected him. He sat in the idling car, hands on the wheel, trying to process what had just happened. Suspended, under investigation, potentially finished at Summit Enterprises, which meant starting over somewhere else, finding a new night shift job that paid enough and offered the flexibility he needed for Isla. The medical debt wouldn't wait for him to get settled. The rent wouldn't pause while he figured things out. His phone rang, an unknown number lighting up the screen. Marcus almost didn't answer, didn't think he could handle more bad news in the same hour. But something made him hit the green button. A crisp male voice, efficient and polished. Mr. Brennan, this is Andrew Blake, Miss Stone's executive assistant. Miss Stone has requested your presence at her office this morning. 9 o'clock sharp. Will that be possible? Marcus blinked, his brain struggling to shift gears. I was just suspended, told to stay away from the building pending investigation. I'm aware of the situation. Miss Stone is also aware. Her request supersedes any other directives you may have received. Can you be here at 9? It wasn't really a question. Commands rarely were when they came wrapped in politeness. I'll be there. Excellent. Security will be expecting you. Come directly to the 23rd floor. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in the sudden silence. Suspended and summoned within the same 90 minutes. The whiplash would have been funny if his entire future wasn't balanced on whatever happened next. He had an hour and 15 minutes. Not enough time to go home, too much time to just sit in the car. Marcus drove to a diner 3 blocks from Summit, one of those 24-hour places that serve the night shift and the desperate. The coffee was better than anything he could make at home, and the waitress didn't ask questions when he ordered a cup and nothing else. The text to Mrs. Callahan was brief. Running late. Meeting at work. Explain later. Tell Isla I love her. The response came quickly. She knows. Good luck, whatever this is. Marcus stared at his reflection in the diner's window. The city moving past outside, people heading to jobs where they belonged and understood the rules. He'd spent 7 years understanding the rules, knowing his place, accepting that hard work didn't always mean advancement, that competence wasn't the same as opportunity. Then Isla had told him to be brave, and he'd walked across a room toward a woman everyone else abandoned, and now nothing made sense anymore. At 8:45, he paid for coffee he'd barely touched and drove back to Summit. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing somehow. Morning sun caught the glass and steel, making it gleam with corporate optimism. Marcus parked in visitor parking, his employee spot, suddenly feeling presumptuous, and walked through the main entrance he'd only ever used during hiring 7 years ago. Security recognized him despite the unusual hour, but the guard's expression held new calculation. Word had spread then. The night janitor who'd driven the CEO home was now the subject of building-wide speculation. The elevator to 23 was the same one he'd cleaned 1,000 times, but riding it felt foreign. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man in a gray uniform heading somewhere he didn't belong, except this time he'd been invited. Andrew Blake waited when the doors opened, exactly as polished as his voice suggested. Late 20s, perfectly tailored suit, the kind of efficiency that came from working directly with someone like Catherine Stone. Mr. Brennan, thank you for coming. He didn't offer to shake hands, just gestured toward the hallway Marcus knew from his cleaning roots. Except instead of industrial carpet and fluorescent overhead daylight poured through windows, transforming the space into something almost beautiful. Catherine's office occupied the corner double doors of dark wood that Andrew knocked on once before opening. Mr. Brennan is here, Miss Stone. Send him in. The voice was different from Friday night. It controlled sharp, every syllable carrying the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Marcus stepped through the doors into a space that felt impossibly large. One wall entirely windows, offering views of Chicago spreading toward the lake. The other walls held art and photographs, a bookshelf that looked actually used rather than decorative. Behind a desk of dark wood that probably cost more than Marcus's car sat Catherine Stone, and she bore no resemblance to the woman who'd cried in his passenger seat. Charcoal suit hair pulled back severely, makeup that could have been painted on porcelain. The Iron Lady fully restored. But when her eyes met his, something flickered there. Recognition of their shared moment, perhaps. Or acknowledgement that they both knew what lay beneath these professional masks. "Mr. Brennan, please sit." Marcus sat in a chair designed for comfort, but offering none too aware of his worn uniform against her expensive furniture. Catherine folded her hands on the desk, studying him with an intensity that made looking away tempting. "I owe you an apology for putting you in a difficult position Friday night, for the consequences you're facing because you chose to help when help was needed. You don't, let me finish." The words came firm but not unkind. Marcus closed his mouth. "I reviewed the security footage this morning. Every angle, garage, elevator, lobby. I saw how carefully you treated me, how you protected my dignity when no one else cared enough to try." She opened a folder on her desk, turning it so Marcus could see the forms inside. "The investigation is closed. Allegations dismissed. You're cleared of any wrongdoing." Relief washed through him so intensely his hands trembled. He pressed them against his thighs to stop the shaking. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There's more we need to discuss." Catherine stood walking to the windows. Morning light caught her profile, and for a moment Marcus could see the exhaustion she'd hidden beneath makeup and authority. "Friday night in your car, you mentioned your father, William Brennan." Marcus's chest constricted. He'd barely remembered saying it, the conversation hazy through his own anxiety and her intoxication. "Yes. This morning I searched company records, old contractor files going back 30 years. William Brennan worked briefly at Lincoln High School in the late 90s. HVAC maintenance. 6 months, March through August, 1997. She turned to face him, and her eyes held something raw. "My father was custodian there during those exact months. James Stone. According to memorial service records I found in storage, someone named William Brennan attended his funeral in December 1997, left a card." Catherine's voice wavered slightly, the first crack in her professional armor. "The card said James was a good man who deserved better. We all do." Marcus felt the words settle into his bones, heavy with meaning he hadn't known existed until this moment. His father had known Catherine's father, had respected him enough to attend his funeral to leave a message about dignity and worth. "I didn't know. My father he didn't talk much about work, just came home tired and tried to forget about it until the next day." "Mine too." Catherine returned to her desk, but didn't sit standing behind her chair like it offered protection. Two janitors who knew each other briefly decades ago, both dead too young from work that society treats as disposable. And now their children meet because one of them had the decency to help when everyone else walked away. She pulled another folder from her desk drawer, this one thicker. "This promotion isn't about Friday night, Marcus. It's about recognizing 7 years of work I should have noticed long before you drove me home. But knowing about our fathers, about how William saw value in James when the world didn't, it makes me certain this is right." The folder slid across the desk toward him, official Summit Enterprises letterhead visible through the transparent cover. "Facilities coordinator, acting role, 90-day trial period, office on the 12th floor, $15,000 annual increase. You'll work with Bridget Sullivan, she's our North Regional lead. She'll mentor you on operations management." Marcus stared at the folder like it might bite him. His brain struggled to process the pivot from suspension to promotion, from potential termination to opportunity. "Ms. Stone, this looks exactly like what people are already saying, that I helped you to get something, that this is favoritism or worse. Let them say it. Let them wonder if kindness might actually lead somewhere in this company. Maybe it'll inspire some of them to try it. Or it'll make my life here impossible. Every success questioned, every failure magnified because people think I didn't earn this." Catherine leaned forward, both hands flat on the desk. "Then prove them wrong. Deliver results so undeniable they can't be attributed to anything except competence. Show everyone in this building that 7 years of observation and expertise matter more than an MBA and a family connection." The challenge in her voice pulled something loose in Marcus's chest. Not anger exactly, more like recognition that she was right. He could refuse this on principle, could maintain his invisible status to avoid accusation. Or he could step forward into visibility and forced the world to acknowledge he belonged there. I need to talk to my daughter. Catherine's expression softened, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. Of course, you have until Wednesday to decide, but Marcus, she paused, choosing words carefully. Friday night in your car, I felt seen for the first time in years, not because you wanted something from me, because you didn't need anything from me. You just cared. The vulnerability in her admission made the massive office feel suddenly smaller, intimate, in a way that had nothing to do with the physical space. I saw someone alone, someone who understood what it feels like when the world looks past you. We're both alone, aren't we? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. Marcus stood taking the folder with hands that still wanted to shake. Wednesday, I'll give you an answer. Catherine nodded, professional mask sliding back into place. Thank you for coming. And Marcus, whatever you decide, thank you for Friday night. It mattered more than you know. The elevator ride down felt surreal, folder tucked under Marcus's arm like a bomb with a slow fuse. 90 days to prove himself. 15,000 more per year, enough to clear the medical debt in 2 years instead of 5. An office instead of a supply closet. Respect instead of invisibility. Unless it all fell apart, spectacularly vindicating everyone who said janitors should stay janitors. Mrs. Callahan was waiting when Marcus got home at 10:30, Isla already at school. The old woman took one look at his face and put coffee on without asking. That bad, that complicated. He told her everything, the suspension and the summons and the promotion offer, watching her weathered face shift through surprise to concern to something that might have been pride. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, steam from her coffee curling between them. Your father would be proud of you, not for the promotion, he never cared about titles. Proud that you helped someone when it cost you something. That's the measure of a man, Marcus. Not what he has, but what he'll risk for others. And if I accept this and fail, if it turns out I'm not qualified, and everyone was right to keep me in my place. Mrs. Callahan's hand found his across the table, papery skin over bones that had held together through decades of her own struggles. Then you fail trying something brave instead of succeeding at staying small. Isla needs to see that. She needs to know her father isn't afraid to reach for something better. That evening, Marcus waited until homework was done and dinner cleared before sitting Isla down at their kitchen table, the promotion folder between them like evidence in a trial where he was both defendant and judge. Remember how I told you something happened at the party, that I helped someone? Isla nodded, eyes bright with anticipation. The person I helped is the CEO, Ms. Stone. She's offered me a different job. Not cleaning anymore, coordinating, managing other people who do facilities work. He opened the folder, showing her the official letter with its impressive salary number. Isla's eyes went wide. Dad, that's so much money. We could get a bigger apartment. You could get a new car. I could... Hold on, Bug, it's not that simple. Marcus took a breath, trying to find words a 9-year-old would understand. Some people are going to think I only got this job because I helped Ms. Stone, that I didn't earn it. They're going to say mean things and wait for me to fail. Isla's face scrunched up, indignation coloring her cheeks. But you didn't know she'd offer you a job when you helped her. You just did it because it was right. You and I know that, but other people won't believe it. So prove it to them. Show them you're good at the job. The simple confidence in her voice made Marcus's throat ache. Isla saw the world in such clear lines, still right and wrong, earned and unearned. She didn't understand yet how muddy reality could be, how perception mattered as much as truth. There's something else, Bug. If I take this job, I'll work during the day, 8 in the morning to 6 at night. That means understanding dawned in Isla's eyes, and with it came fear. You won't be home when I get back from school. Mrs. Callahan can pick you up, and I'll be home by 6:30. We'll still have dinner together, still do homework, still have time. But Isla was shaking her head, tears forming fast. No, no, because that's what Mom said before she left. That she'd be home later, but we'd still have time. And then she was never there. And then she was gone. The accusation hit Marcus harder than any suspension or promotion could have. He'd known Isla carried scars from Sarah leaving, but he hadn't realized how deep they cut. How much his daughter lived in fear of abandonment happening again. Marcus pulled Isla onto his lap despite her being almost too big for it, holding her while she cried against his shoulder. "Listen to me, Bug. Listen carefully." He waited until her sobs quieted to hiccups. "Your mom left because she wasn't ready to be a mom. That was her choice. It had nothing to do with you or me or how busy she was. She left because she wanted different things than we did. But if you're too busy, I will never be too busy for you. Never. No job, no amount of money, nothing is more important than you. If this new position means I see you less, I'll turn it down. Because you're the reason I work at all. You're the reason for everything." Isla pulled back to look at him, and tears tracking through the freckles on her cheeks. "Really, you'd say no even though it's so much money?" "Really, but Bug, Mrs. Callahan will still pick you up. I'll still be home by 6:30. And weekends, no more working nights means every Saturday and Sunday I'm home. All day on. Just us." He could see her processing this fear, warring with the temptation of having her father present for entire weekends instead of sleeping through them. "Every weekend. Every single one. And if the wow ever makes me miss important things, your school plays, your soccer games, anything that matters, I quit. That's a promise." Isla was quiet for a long time, small fingers tracing patterns on Marcus's work shirt. Finally, she spoke, voice small but determined. "Remember what you always tell me about being scared but doing it anyway?" Marcus smiled despite everything. "Yeah. You should take the job, Dad. Be scared and do it anyway. Because I think you'll be really good at it, and because I want to see what happens when someone gives you a chance." The simple faith in her words broke something open in Marcus's chest. All his fears about failing, about not being qualified, about rumors and resentment, none of it mattered as much as showing his daughter that reaching for opportunity was worth the risk. "Okay, I'll take it." Isla hugged him tight, and Marcus held her there in their small kitchen in their modest apartment, understanding that whatever happened next, this moment mattered more. His daughter believing in him, choosing to trust that this time would be different, that success was possible, even for people like them. Wednesday morning, Marcus called Andrew Blake and accepted the position. By noon, the paperwork was processed, his new employee ID ready for pickup. By Thursday, he was sitting in an office on the 12th floor that had walls and a door and a window overlooking the city. The nameplate arrived Friday: Marcus Brennan, Facilities Coordinator. Monday of the following week, he met his team leads for the first time. Bridget Sullivan arrived exactly on time, a woman in her mid-40s with Irish red hair going gray and eyes that had seen enough corporate bullshit to fill libraries. She extended her hand and her grip was firm. "Marcus, I've heard interesting things about you." Behind her came Garrett Walsh, early 50s military bearing, still evident in his posture, despite years in civilian work. His handshake was perfunctory, his expression skeptical. 60 years combined experience between the three of us. Now reporting to someone who was emptying our trash last month. This should be interesting. The challenge hung in the air, daring Marcus to defend himself or make excuses. He did neither. "You're right, I was. And while I was emptying that trash, I was paying attention. Learning every system in this building. Tracking patterns nobody asked me to track because I could see problems nobody else noticed." He pulled out his laptop, opening the spreadsheets he'd maintained for 7 years. Floors 8 through 11 need HVAC replacement, not repair. The current strategy of patching failures is costing $12,000 a month in energy waste and emergency calls. "I can prove it." Bridget leaned in genuine interest, replacing polite skepticism. "You have 7 years of HVAC data. Every zone, temperature logs, repair frequency, energy costs correlated to outside weather. I tracked ballast failures on 11 plumbing issues on 14 electrical loads across the building. I saw what was breaking and when, and I documented all of it." Garrett's expression shifted, military precision, recognizing another kind of discipline. "You did this on your own initiative. Nobody asked for these reports. Nobody asked janitors for reports, but I could see the patterns, so I tracked them. Figured someday it might matter." Kevin Foster, the third lead, spoke for the first time. Quiet voice, thoughtful eyes. "The ballast failures on 11. We've been trying to get approval to replace those fixtures for 2 years. You tracked the correlation to sick days. 23% higher on floors with lighting issues. I cross-referenced with publicly available HR data. Replacing the fixtures costs $8,000, but we'd save 15 annually and reduce sick leave and increase productivity. Bridget sat back, reassessing. Okay, so you have data, but managing people is different than observing systems. We have 50 direct and indirect reports, budgets, personnel issues, contractor, negotiations. You ready for that? Marcus met her eyes squarely. No, I'm not ready. I've never managed people before, never negotiated a contract, never presented to executives. That's why I need you to teach me. I'm not pretending to know what I don't, but I do know these systems better than anyone, and I'm willing to learn the rest. The honesty seemed to catch all three off guard. Garrett's posture relaxed fractionally. At least you're not pretending to know everything. That's something. I'll teach you the people side if you teach us how to use this data effectively, Bridget offered. Capital Committee has shot us down 3 times on the HVAC replacement. If your numbers can make the case, we'll back you. But you have to do the work. Deal. They shook on it, and Marcus felt the first tentative foundation of something that might become respect. Not because of Catherine's patronage, but because he'd brought value they needed and admitted where he was weak. The rest of that first week passed in a blur of learning. Bridget walked him through budget processes and personnel management. Garrett taught him contractor relations and quality control. Kevin showed him how to navigate corporate politics without losing his integrity. Marcus absorbed everything, working 12-hour days, while his brain adapted to thinking like a manager instead of a worker. Thursday afternoon, an envelope appeared on his desk. Plain white, no return address. Inside was a single printed page, anonymous cruelty distilled to its essence. Everyone knows you slept your way into this job. Enjoy it while it lasts. Marcus stared at the words, anger and humiliation warring in his chest. He'd expected skepticism, had prepared for doubts about his qualifications. But this was different. This was vicious, designed to wound rather than question. Bridget found him 10 minutes later, still holding the letter. Let me guess. Anonymous accusation. Marcus looked up, surprised. You've seen these before. Garrett got one last year when he recommended his nephew for an internship. Someone accused him of nepotism, said ugly things about favoritism. It's what happens when people can't attack your work, so they attack your character. She took the letter from his hands and fed it into his desk shredder, the paper turning to confetti. Don't let it live in your head. Prove them wrong with results, not by defending yourself against anonymous cowards. The advice was sound, but the poison had already entered Marcus's bloodstream. Someone hated him enough to write that. Probably multiple someones, all watching and waiting for him to fail. Friday brought a different kind of challenge. The cafeteria at lunch, where invisible lines separated executives from middle management from support staff, all enforced through unspoken understanding. Marcus's promotion had left him in limbo, too senior to sit with his former janitor colleagues, too recent and too suspect to be welcomed by established managers. He took his tray to an empty table, preparing for a lonely meal, when a voice interrupted. This seat taken, Rachel Kim from marketing, holding a salad and wearing a cautiously friendly smile. She sat without waiting for an answer, and within moments, 2 others joined them. Daniel from IT, Jennifer from accounting. All curious, all willing to give him a chance. Jennifer spoke first. The heating on 6th floor hasn't worked right in months. We've submitted 3 tickets. Nothing ever gets fixed. Marcus pulled out his phone, opening the notes app he'd transferred his data into. Northeast corner zone 3, damper issue. Parts have been back-ordered, but I'll expedite the order this afternoon. Should be fixed by next week. Her eyebrows rose. You actually know the zone numbers. I spent 7 years learning every system in this building. That knowledge doesn't disappear just because my title changed. Daniel leaned in, interest genuine. So the rumors are true, you really were a janitor before Catherine Stone promoted you. Here it was, the question everyone wanted to ask, the doubt lurking behind every interaction. Marcus set down his fork, meeting Daniel's gaze directly. Night shift maintenance, yes, and she promoted me because I've worked here for 7 years and know these systems better than most people realize. The party was when she finally noticed. But it's not why I'm qualified for this job. Rachel spoke carefully, but you don't have a degree. How did you get past HR requirements? Ms. Stone waived them. She decided experience and demonstrated competence mattered more than credentials. I understand that's unusual. I also understand some people think I don't deserve this position. All I can do is prove myself through results. Jennifer nodded slowly. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I hope you do prove yourself. This company could use some new perspectives in leadership. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that, but Marcus left lunch feeling both encouraged and exhausted. Every interaction was a test, every question a potential trap. He was hyper-aware of how he spoke, how he carried himself, whether his vocabulary marked him as educated enough or too working class. Being visible, he was learning, came with scrutiny he'd never experienced while invisible. Week 5 brought the crisis that would define whether Marcus belonged in his new role or had been promoted beyond competence into spectacular failure. Garrett burst into his office Wednesday morning, face pale beneath his tan. We have a problem. Building C in Denver. Boiler's dead, complete failure. It's 15 degrees outside and 300 people have no heat. Marcus's stomach dropped. Building C was his responsibility, one of 3 regional offices under his coordination. He pulled up maintenance records, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. The boiler had been flagged 6 months ago by Jim Patterson, the facilities manager who'd retired before Marcus was promoted. The recommendation was clear: detailed inspection, possible replacement. But the follow-up line made Marcus's blood run cold. Someone had edited the final summary to read, "Continued monitoring acceptable." Who changed Patterson's recommendation? Garrett shook his head. Patterson retired 3 months ago. There was a gap before you came on. Things fell through cracks. A $300,000 crack if they had to close the building. Marcus grabbed his phone, calling the contractor listed in the files. Mountain State's mechanical owner, named Carl. Carl's voice was gruff but honest. Parts for that old model, 3, maybe 4 days, if I can even find them. Might be discontinued. Marcus's mind raced through options, all of them bad. What about alternatives? Temporary heating? Not enough to heat a building that size. You're looking at sending everyone home, losing days of productivity. What if we replace the whole unit? Carl paused. I've got a refurbished boiler from a demolition job last month. Tested thoroughly, actually newer and more efficient than what you've got. I could install it in 5 days if you're willing to pay rush fees. How much? The number Carl quoted made Marcus wince, but it was less than the cost of closing the building. Do it. I'll have authorization to you within an hour. You sure that's a lot of money to commit without running it up the chain? Marcus thought about Warren's warning about staying in his lane, about the anonymous letter in his shredder and the people waiting for him to fail. Then he thought about 300 employees sitting in a freezing building, about his responsibility to keep systems running. I'm sure. Get your team mobilized. After hanging up, Marcus pulled up authorization forms, his hands hovering over the keyboard. This was the kind of decision that could make or break his credibility. If the refurbished boiler failed, if Carl's company didn't deliver, if the cost exceeded projections, he'd be finished. But if he delayed to get approval, if he let bureaucracy slow down the solution, 300 people would be sent home, and his inability to handle crises would be equally damning. He typed in the authorization code Catherine had given him for emergency expenditures, the system accepting it without question. Just like that, Marcus Brennan had committed Summit Enterprises to a 6-figure emergency repair based on nothing but his judgment and a contractor's word. Bridget appeared in his doorway as he was documenting the decision. Heard about Denver. Bold move authorizing the repair without escalating. Bold or stupid, depending on whether it works. She sat down, expression serious. You know this is a test, right? Could be coincidence that the boiler failed now. Could be someone knew it would and left it for you to handle. Could be active sabotage. Why would anyone sabotage me? Because you're a threat. You represent change, disruption to established order. Some people don't want to see you succeed because your success means they've been doing things wrong for years. Marcus felt the paranoia creeping in, the sense of invisible enemies circling. What do I do? Exactly what you're doing. Make decisions, document everything, deliver results. And trust that competence matters more than politics. Wednesday afternoon brought complications that tested whether Bridget's optimism was warranted. Carl's team installed the refurbished boiler and ran initial tests. The unit failed. Pressure valve defect requiring a different unit in 3 additional days. The new cost estimate, $178,000, well above Marcus's authorization limit. He'd have to go to Catherine for approval, admitting his first major decision had already exceeded budget. His hand shook slightly as he dialed her direct line. Her assistant answered, but Catherine came on within seconds. Marcus, the Denver situation. The first unit failed testing. Carl can get another, but it's 25,000 more and 3 additional days. I need approval to exceed my limit. Silence stretched across the line. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat loud in his ears. Finally, do you trust this contractor to deliver? Yes, and if he can't, I'll fly to Denver myself to troubleshoot. You're serious. Completely. This is my responsibility. Another pause, then Catherine's voice came firm. Approved. But Marcus, if this fails, it's on you. I can't protect you from bad decisions. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for trust. You have it. The line went dead. Marcus sat back in his chair, understanding he'd just bet his entire career on a contractor he'd never met and a boiler he'd never seen. If this worked, he'd have proven he could handle crisis management. If it failed, he'd have proven his critics right. Thursday evening, he flew to Denver, first time leaving Isla overnight since she was born. The fear in her eyes as he explained cut deeper than any professional anxiety. What if something happens to you? Nothing will happen. But this is my job now, Bug. I have to take responsibility. More important than me. The question forced Marcus to his knees in front of her, hands on her shoulders. Nothing is more important than you, but this is how I take care of you. By doing my job well, keeping my position, providing for us. You understand? She nodded, reluctant, tears threatening. Mrs. Callahan will be here. I'll call every 3 hours, and I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. I promise. Friday morning at 5, Marcus stood in coveralls alongside Carl's crew in a Denver mechanical room, personally inspecting every valve and gasket on the new boiler. The contractor watched with approval as Marcus ran tests, checked pressure readings, verified connections with the thoroughness of someone who'd spent years understanding how systems failed. At 8 o'clock, the heat began flowing through Building C's ductwork. By 9, 300 employees were back at work, grateful and warm. By 10, Marcus was on a plane back to Chicago, exhausted but vindicated. The text from Garrett came through as the plane pushed back. You did it, boss. Impressive. Another from Bridget. Well played. They're talking about you in the executive corridor. Good talk. And one from Catherine. Just 2 words. Well done. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself feel the relief, the satisfaction of crisis managed successfully. He'd proven something today. Maybe not to everyone, but to the people who mattered. To his team, to Catherine, to himself. When he landed at O'Hare and turned his phone back on, there was a voicemail from an HR number he didn't recognize. Patricia Whitmore's voice, professional and ominous. Ms. Brennan, we need to discuss an anonymous complaint that's been filed regarding your conduct. Please call me Monday morning to schedule an interview. This is time sensitive. The relief evaporated, replaced by cold dread. Someone had filed a formal complaint about what he couldn't imagine, but the timing right after his Denver success felt deliberate. An anonymous letter had been just the opening salvo. Now the real attack was beginning, and Marcus had no idea who was behind it or how to defend himself against the accusations he hadn't even heard yet. He drove home from the airport in silence, the Chicago skyline rising ahead of him, beautiful and indifferent to the small dramas playing out in its shadow. Isla would be waiting, excited to see him. Mrs. Callahan would have dinner ready. For a few hours, he could pretend everything was fine. But Monday was coming, and with it would come another test of whether a janitor who dared to step forward belonged anywhere except back in the shadows where he'd started. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability, Patricia Whitmore's voicemail still echoing in Marcus's mind from the weekend. He'd spent Saturday and Sunday trying to focus on Isla, on normal things like grocery shopping and homework help, but the dread had colored everything gray. The HR office on the 5th floor felt deliberately designed to intimidate, all glass walls and uncomfortable chairs. Patricia Whitmore sat behind a desk that held nothing except a tablet and a single folder. Her expression professionally neutral in a way that promised nothing good. Mr. Brennan, thank you for coming. She didn't offer her hand, just gestured to the chair across from her. Marcus sat, palms already sweating despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. Patricia opened the folder, her movements precise. An anonymous complaint was filed Friday afternoon alleging you engaged in inappropriate conduct with female employees. specifically unwanted attention during cafeteria interactions and departmental meetings. The complainant provided dates and locations but declined to identify themselves. The accusation landed like a physical blow, despite Marcus having anticipated something of this nature. His mind raced through every interaction, every conversation, searching for anything that could be misconstrued. That's completely false. I've been professional with everyone. That will be determined through our investigation. I'll need you to provide a detailed written account of your interactions with all employees over the past 6 weeks. Dates, times, witnesses where applicable. I'll also be interviewing individuals mentioned in the complaint and reviewing security footage. Patricia's eyes held no warmth, no indication of whether she believed the allegations or was simply following protocol. How long will this take? 2 to 3 weeks typically. You'll remain in your position during the investigation, but I'd advise limiting one-on-one interactions with female staff members until this is resolved. The advice felt like a trap. Follow it and appear guilty, confirming the need for caution. Ignore it and risk another complaint. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. One more thing. Do you know anyone who might have reason to file a false complaint against you? Anyone who's expressed hostility about your promotion? Marcus thought about the anonymous letter, about the whispers he'd heard in hallways, about the way some executive's eyes followed him with calculation rather than welcome. Half the building probably has opinions about my promotion, but I don't know who'd go this far. Patricia made a note on her tablet. I'll need that written statement by Wednesday. Be thorough. Leave nothing out. The weekend that followed was a blur of documentation and anxiety. Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop reconstructing 6 weeks of professional life in excruciating detail. Every lunch conversation, every meeting, every casual hallway exchange. He cross-referenced with his calendar, his email, his badge, access logs showing when he'd been in which parts of the building. The document grew to 23 pages of dense text, each interaction, documented with the precision he'd brought to 7 years of HVAC data collection. If thoroughness could save him, he'd be safe. But thoroughness wouldn't matter if someone had decided his guilt before the investigation even began. Tuesday afternoon, he did something he'd sworn he'd never do, called a lawyer. The consultation cost $250 he didn't have put on a credit card that was already groaning under Isla's medical debt. But the lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Morrison, reviewed his statement and gave him the first reassurance he'd felt in days. This is good work, detailed, verifiable, unemotional. If they're operating in good faith, this should be enough. The problem is proving the complaint itself is malicious. Can they do that, Trace, who filed it? Rebecca leaned back in her office chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. If it was filed electronically, there's an IP address, a device identifier, timestamps. Digital forensics can usually determine origin. The question is whether HR will look or if they'll just go through the motions and let suspicion do the damage regardless of outcome. Marcus left her office feeling marginally better but significantly poorer. The investigation would take weeks. During that time, he'd work under a cloud of suspicion, every interaction, scrutinize every decision questioned. The timing couldn't be worse. The HVAC proposal was scheduled for review by the Capital Committee. In 2 weeks, his first major presentation to the people who controlled Summit's purse strings. Wednesday, he submitted his statement to Patricia, watching her face for any reaction as she received the thumb drive containing his meticulously documented defense. She gave nothing away, just logged the submission and dismissed him with professional courtesy that felt colder than outright hostility. Thursday brought an unexpected ally. Jennifer from accounting appeared at Marcus's office door, her face flushed with anger. I just got called in to HR. They're asking me questions about you, about whether you made me uncomfortable in the cafeteria. Do you know how humiliating it is to be interrogated about completely innocent conversations? Marcus stood, alarm and guilt whirring in his chest. I'm sorry, I never wanted. I told them you've been perfectly professional, that you're one of the few managers who actually listens when I explain facilities problems instead of dismissing them. But this whole thing is ridiculous, and whoever filed that complaint should be ashamed. After she left, Marcus sat heavily in his chair, understanding another dimension of the damage. The investigation wasn't just hurting him, it was disrupting other people's work, forcing them into uncomfortable situations, creating exactly the kind of hostile environment the complaint had falsely accused him of generating. Week 2 of the investigation brought a team meeting Patricia insisted on attending. Marcus sat at the conference table with Bridget Garrett and Kevin, acutely aware of Patricia taking notes in the corner. Her questions were pointed. Have any of you witnessed behavior from Mr. Brennan that could be construed as inappropriate toward female employees? The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before Kevin spoke. I've worked with Marcus almost daily since his promotion. Multiple meetings with women present. His behavior has been appropriate and frankly overly cautious about maintaining professional boundaries. Bridget nodded. Confirmed. I've been in meetings where Marcus needed to give critical feedback to female team members. He handled it professionally, focused on work performance, never made it personal. Garrett's response was more pointed. I've had lunch with Marcus twice. Both times other people approached him, not vice versa. The questions he asked were things like, which floor are you on? And how can I help with your facilities issues? Real threatening stuff. The sarcasm was heavy enough to cut, and Patricia's expression tightened. Sarcasm isn't helpful, Mr. Walsh. Neither are anonymous complaints designed to destroy someone's career. We all know this is retaliation. The question is whether HR is going to do actual due diligence or just accept accusations at face value because it's easier than admitting someone's weaponizing the system. Patricia closed her tablet with deliberate care. I assure you this investigation will be thorough and fair. Mr. Brennan, I'll need you to remain available for follow-up questions. After she left, Bridget turned to Marcus with something that might have been sympathy. This is orchestrated. Someone with access to HR processes, someone who knows exactly how to file the complaint that will trigger maximum investigation. Any idea who Marcus thought about the Capital Committee review coming up about who might lose if his HVAC proposal succeeded? Gerald Preston opposed the HVAC replacement in the budget meeting, made it clear he didn't trust my data or my qualifications. The CFO, Garrett mused, that would track. He has the political connections to make something like this happen. But can we prove it? Bridget shook her head. Not without evidence. And accusing the CFO of filing false complaints is career suicide without proof. The investigation dragged into its 3rd week each day, a fresh exercise in professional paranoia. Marcus found himself second-guessing every email, every conversation, hyper-aware of who was in the room and how his words might be interpreted. The stress bled into his home life, despite his best efforts to shield Isla from it. Wednesday evening, she found him at the kitchen table staring at his laptop without seeing it. Dad, you okay? You look sad. Marcus forced a smile that probably looked as fake as it felt. Just work stuff, bug. Nothing for you to worry about. But Isla was too perceptive, too attuned to her father's moods after years of it being just the two of them. Is someone being mean to you at work? The question was so directly on target that Marcus couldn't deflect. Some people don't think I deserve my new job. They're making things difficult. Isla climbed onto his lap despite being almost too big for it, wrapping thin arms around his neck. You look like I did when Madison's friend said I was weird for reading all the time. Like you're trying to prove something to people who already decided they don't like you. The observation was devastatingly accurate. Marcus held his daughter close, drawing strength from her certainty, even as he felt his own confidence eroding under sustained attack. What did you do about Madison's friends? You told me their opinion doesn't change who I am, that I should keep being myself and the right people would see my value. Marcus had forgotten giving that advice, but hearing it reflected back made him smile genuinely for the first time in days. Smart dad. The smartest, but you have to follow your own advice, okay? Don't let mean people make you small again. Thursday morning brought the breakthrough Patricia's investigation needed, though it came from an unexpected source. She called Marcus to her office, and this time her professional neutrality had cracked slightly towards something that might have been vindication. The complaint was filed electronically from a finance department computer. Specifically, Michelle Thornton's workstation. She's Gerald Preston's executive assistant. Marcus's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Michelle filed it. No, badge logs show she was at lunch when the complaint was submitted. Someone used her computer without authorization. Someone with access to the finance executive floor. The implication hung heavy between them. Gerald Preston had access. Gerald Preston had motive. But Patricia was too careful to make direct accusations without more evidence. The complaint has been dismissed. After interviewing 12 employees and reviewing security footage, we found no corroboration of the allegations. Your record will show the complaint was filed and dismissed as unsubstantiated. Relief washed through Marcus, but it was tempered by the knowledge that unsubstantiated wasn't the same as completely baseless. The cloud would remain, the questions would linger. Thank you. Patricia's expression shifted into something almost sympathetic. For what it's worth, I believe you were targeted, but believing it and proving it are different things. Be careful, Mr. Brennan. Whoever did this will likely try again if you continue to threaten their interests. The warning followed Marcus through the rest of that day and into Friday when Catherine summoned him to her office, along with Patricia, Gerald Preston, and two board members Marcus vaguely recognized from company photos. Catherine sat behind her massive desk, and her expression promised no quarter for anyone in the room. The investigation into the complaint against Marcus Brennan is complete. Allegations dismissed as unsubstantiated. But we were also able to identify the source through digital forensics. Gerald's face had gone carefully blank, his hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. The complaint was filed from your executive assistant's workstation, Gerald. She claims she didn't file it and was at lunch during the submission window, which means either she's lying or someone else used her computer. That's a large department. Could have been anyone with access. Catherine's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Could have been, except your calendar shows you were in the office during the filing window. Your assistant keeps meticulous records of who accesses her workstation when she's away. And frankly, Gerald, you're the only person who had both motive and opportunity. This is speculation. Is it? Let's talk about patterns. 3 years ago, Sarah Michaels challenged your accounting methods. Suddenly, she faced an ethics investigation eventually dismissed. 2 years ago, David Park pushed back on a finance decision, accused of insider trading, also dismissed. Both investigations launched from finance department computers. Both derailed promising careers even after exoneration. Catherine leaned forward and Marcus could see why they called her the Iron Lady. You've weaponized HR processes to eliminate anyone who challenges you. And I've tolerated it because you were good at your cum and the board liked your results. But this ends now. Gerald's voice came tight with suppressed rage. You can't prove any connection between those cases. I don't need to prove it in court. This is my company, not a legal proceeding. So here's your choice: resign effective immediately with a generous severance package and neutral reference, or I launch a formal investigation into your conduct. We'll subpoena your emails, your communications, make very public exactly how you've operated. The room went silent, tension thick enough to choke on. Marcus sat frozen, watching this power play unfold and realizing Catherine was doing for him what he could never have done for himself. Gerald's jaw worked, muscles tensing beneath skin that had gone gray. The board trusts my financial oversight. You need me. The board trusts numbers. They don't care who produces them as long as they're accurate. And your deputy has been doing most of the actual work for the past 2 years anyway. Catherine's smile was predatory. So what's it going to be? The silence stretched 30 seconds, 40, a full minute. Then Gerald stood, his movements stiff with barely controlled fury. I'll have my resignation letter on your desk within the hour. Make it 30 on it. And Gerald, if I hear even a whisper of you trying to sabotage this company or its employees after you leave, I will make sure every detail of your conduct becomes very public. Are we clear? Gerald didn't answer, just turned and walked out, his shoulders rigid with suppressed rage. The board members exchanged glances, but said nothing, clearly having been briefed beforehand and aligned with Catherine's decision. After they left, Catherine turned to Patricia. Document everything. I want a full report on the pattern of complaints originating from finance systems over the past 5 years. We're implementing new controls to prevent this kind of abuse. Patricia nodded and departed, leaving Marcus alone with Catherine for the first time since the investigation began. The Iron Lady mask slipped, revealing exhaustion beneath. You didn't have to do that. Force him out. Catherine's laugh was bitter. Yes, I did. Gerald has been a problem for years, and I've enabled him by prioritizing competence over character. Your situation was the final straw. She stood walking to her windows, the Chicago skyline spread behind her. But there's something you should know. Gerald wasn't the mastermind. Marcus's confusion must have shown on his face because Catherine continued. 20 minutes ago, Gerald's lawyer called. He's willing to provide information in exchange for a more favorable severance package. Apparently, Diane Harrington, one of our board members, approached him about raising concerns regarding your qualifications. She wants her nephew Tyler Harrington in a director position. MBA from Harvard, 10 years in consulting, exactly the kind of pedigree she thinks Summit needs. The revelation shifted everything Marcus thought he understood about the attack against him. Gerald wrote a memo to HR questioning your credentials. He admits that, but he claims he didn't know Diane would fabricate a harassment complaint. When Michelle left for lunch, Diane was in Gerald's office reviewing budget reports. She must have used Michelle's computer. Catherine turned to face Marcus. I'm removing Diane from the board effective immediately. Forced resignation for filing a fraudulent complaint designed to damage an employee. Will she go quietly? She'll threaten, claim the other board members won't support this. But I control 51% of voting shares, so her threats are empty. Catherine's expression hardened. No one weaponizes HR in my company. No one uses their power to destroy people who've done nothing wrong except threaten the status quo. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, gratitude mixing with a growing awareness of how much Catherine had risked to protect him. The CFO and a board member both gone because they'd tried to eliminate a janitor who dared to reach beyond his station. Thank you for believing me, for fighting when you didn't have to. I did have to, because if I won't protect employees who work hard and act with integrity, then all my talk about values is just corporate rhetoric. And because, she paused, something vulnerable flickering across her face, because you saw me when I was at my lowest and you helped without agenda. That kind of decency deserves protection, not persecution. The moment stretched between them, charged with implications neither was ready to address. Then Catherine's phone buzzed, shattering the intimacy, and she was the CEO again. Your HVAC proposal goes to the board next Thursday. I expect you to present it yourself. Show them what institutional knowledge combined with proper authority can achieve. Marcus left her office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The weight of false accusation finally lifted. But the relief lasted only until he checked his own phone and saw 3 missed calls from Mrs. Callahan and a voicemail that made his blood run cold. The old woman's voice was strained with worry. Marcus, it's Isla. She has a fever 102 degrees and she's crying about stomach pain. I'm taking her to the emergency room. Meet us there. Everything else, the investigation, the vindication, the board presentation evaporated in the face of parental terror. Marcus was in his car and speeding toward Chicago Memorial before his conscious mind caught up with his body's response. The emergency room was controlled, chaos, people with injuries and illnesses filling plastic chairs, the smell of antiseptic and fear thick in the recycled air. Marcus found Mrs. Callahan in a waiting area, her weathered face creased with concern. They took her back 20 minutes ago. They're running tests, checking for appendicitis. The word hit Marcus like a hammer. Appendicitis. Isla had already had her appendix removed 2 years ago, the surgery that had left them $31,000 in debt. This had to be something else. A nurse called his name and Marcus followed her through double doors into the treatment area. Isla lay on a gurney in a curtained bay, pale and small, and crying softly. Her eyes found her father and the tears came harder. Dad, it hurts. My stomach really hurts. Marcus took her hand, feeling how hot her skin was, fighting his own panic to project calm. I know, Bug. The doctors are going to figure out what's wrong and fix it, okay? I'm not leaving you. A young doctor appeared, tablet in hand, her expression professionally sympathetic. Mr. Brennan, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. We're running tests to determine the cause of Isla's pain and fever. Given her history of appendectomy, we're looking at possible gastroenteritis, though we want to rule out other complications. How long until you know? A few hours. We'll keep her comfortable in the meantime. Those few hours stretched into an evening of fluorescent lights and medical smells, of Isla dozing fitfully between bouts of pain, of Marcus watching monitors and trying not to think about medical bills he couldn't afford stacking on top of debt he was already drowning in. Mrs. Callahan had gone home to get clothes and supplies, promising to return with food Marcus knew he wouldn't be able to eat. His phone buzzed at 7:30, Andrew Blake's name on the screen. Marcus almost ignored it, but some instinct made him answer. Mr. Brennan, the board presentation has been confirmed for Thursday at 10. Ms. Stone wanted me to confirm you'll be ready. Marcus looked at his daughter, at the IV in her small arm, at the monitors tracking her vital signs. I can't. My daughter's in the hospital. Tell Ms. Stone I'm sorry, but I have to cancel. A pause on the other end, then Andrew's voice came gentler. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope she's okay. I'll inform Ms. Stone. The call ended and Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. The presentation he'd been preparing for the chance to prove himself to the board, the opportunity to show his HVAC proposal, wasn't just data but real value, all of it meaningless compared to being here while Isla needed him. An hour later, Catherine appeared in the doorway of Isla's curtained bay, still in her business suit, but with her professional arm somehow less imposing in the harsh hospital light. I heard. How is she? Marcus stood, surprise momentarily overriding his exhaustion. They think gastroenteritis, not appendicitis. Should know for sure soon. What are you doing here? Andrew told me. I wanted to check on her. On both of you. Catherine approached the bed carefully, looking at Isla with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. His daughter was sleeping now, breathing steady, but her face still flushed with fever. She looks like you. Same stubborn chin. Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. That's her mother's chin, actually, but the stubbornness is definitely mine. Catherine pulled up a chair, settling in like she planned to stay, which made no sense at all. The CEO didn't visit employees' sick children in emergency rooms. You canceled the presentation. It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. I had to. She needs me here. I know. That's why I'm rescheduling it to next Thursday. And Marcus, Catherine's voice carried something raw, unguarded. You made the right choice. My father worked himself to death trying to prove he mattered. 70-hour weeks, nights, and weekends, every shift he could pick up. He thought if he worked hard enough, people would finally see his value. She was quiet for a moment, watching Isla sleep. He died without seeing me graduate high school, without meeting any grandchildren he might have had, without knowing I became CEO. All that work, all that sacrifice, and he missed everything that actually mattered. Catherine turned to look at Marcus directly. Don't make his mistake. Isla matters more than any board meeting. That's why you'll be a better leader than most people in that building, because you understand what's actually important. The words settled into Marcus like a benediction, permission to prioritize his daughter without guilt. They sat in silence for a while, the hospital's ambient sounds washing over them, until Dr. Chen returned with results. Gastroenteritis is suspected. Not appendicitis, just a nasty stomach bug. We'll keep her overnight for observation and IV fluids, but she should be fine to go home tomorrow. The relief was so intense, Marcus's knees went weak. Catherine stood, squeezing his shoulder briefly. I'll let you focus on her. But Marcus, take the rest of this week off. Be with Isla. The presentation can wait. After Catherine left, Marcus pulled his chair close to Isla's bed and took her hand again. She stirred, eyes opening slowly. Is the lady gone? The pretty one in the suit? Yeah, Bug. That was Ms. Stone. She came to check on you. Isla's fever-bright eyes studied her father. You like her. Not just work-like. Real-like. The observation was so unexpected, Marcus didn't know how to respond. Isla smiled, the expression weak but knowing. It's okay, Dad. She looked at you the same way. Like maybe you're both a little less alone when you're together. Out of the mouths of 9-year-olds came truths adults spent years avoiding. Marcus kissed Isla's forehead, grateful she was okay, unsettled by how clearly she'd seen something he'd been trying not to acknowledge. The weekend passed in a blur of recovery, Isla home and improving, but still weak. Marcus stayed close, making soup and reading aloud from her favorite books, letting work and presentations and corporate politics fade into background noise. Monday morning brought an email from Bridget with an attachment that made his blood run cold all over again. She'd been reviewing maintenance contracts as part of preparing for the HVAC proposal and found something disturbing. 5 separate maintenance recommendations over the past 3 years had been mysteriously downgraded after the original facilities manager signed off. All the edits came from finance department IP addresses. And when she cross-referenced the actual contracts that had been approved, a pattern emerged. Midwest Industrial Supply had been consistently chosen over Regional Supply Co. despite being 40% more expensive. The total overpayment over 3 years, approximately $1.8 million. Marcus called Bridget immediately. How did this not get caught in audits? Her voice was grim. Because the invoices were technically legitimate. The prices were high, but not outside normal market fluctuations. You'd only see the pattern if you compared across years and knew what competitive pricing should be. Who approved these contracts? Gerald Preston signed off on all of them as CFO. Whether he knew about the markup or just rubber-stamped his assistant's recommendations, I can't tell. Marcus pulled up his own files running searches on Midwest Industrial Supply. The company registration led him through two shell corporations before he found the ultimate ownership, a holding company whose principal was Richard Harrington, Diane Harrington's husband. The procurement fraud had been happening right under everyone's noses, approved by a CFO who either knew and participated or was too incompetent to notice, orchestrated by a board member using her position to funnel company money to her family's business. Marcus stared at the evidence on his screen, understanding he held power to vindicate himself completely, while potentially destroying Gerald's career and reputation. The CFO had 3 kids in college. Marcus had seen the family photo in Gerald's office during budget meetings. If this came out, Gerald wouldn't just lose his job. He'd face potential criminal charges, civil liability, professional disgrace. But Gerald had tried to block Marcus's HVAC proposal, had enabled the system that kept Marcus invisible for 7 years, had written that memo questioning Marcus's qualifications that Diane had built her attack upon. The moral calculus was impossible. Justice for the fraud versus mercy for Gerald's family. Vindication versus vengeance. Marcus called Bridget back. What do we do with this? She didn't hesitate. Report it. This is theft from the company. Criminal fraud. We have a duty to report. Gerald might have been an unwitting participant. Should his family suffer because Diane manipulated him? Bridget's silence stretched long enough that Marcus thought she might have hung up. Finally, Marcus, Gerald tried to destroy you. He doesn't deserve your mercy. Maybe not, but his kids deserve a father who's not in prison. And I don't want to become the kind of leader who uses power to hurt people, even people who hurt me first. Another long pause, then Bridget's voice came softer. You're a better person than I am. What do you want to do? Marcus thought about his father, about the kind of man William Brennan had been, about the advice he'd given Isla about not letting other people's cruelty make you cruel in return. I'm reporting it to Catherine privately. Let her decide how to handle it. But I want it documented that Gerald gets a chance to defend himself before anything goes public. The call to Catherine came that afternoon, Marcus presenting the evidence while his stomach churned with conflicting emotions. She listened in silence, her expression darkening as he walked through the numbers. 1.8 million. Diane was bolder than I thought. Gerald approved the contracts. Whether he knew, I'll investigate thoroughly. If Gerald was complicit, he faces consequences. If he was just negligent, that's a different matter. Catherine's eyes found Marcus through the phone screen. You could have brought this to the board directly, made Gerald's termination public and humiliating. Why didn't you? Because revenge isn't justice, and destroying him doesn't prove I belong here. It just proves I can be as ruthless as the people who tried to destroy me. The way someone treats those who've wronged them reveals more about their character than how they treat those who support them. Marcus didn't say the words aloud, but they hung in his mind, a principle he was choosing to live by even when it cost him the satisfaction of seeing his enemies fall. Catherine's investigation took 3 days and confirmed what Marcus had suspected. Gerald genuinely hadn't known about the ownership connection between Midwest Industrial and Diane's husband. He'd trusted his board members' contract recommendations without doing due diligence, more negligent than criminal. Diane, already forced to resign from the board over the harassment complaint, now faced potential criminal charges for procurement fraud. Gerald kept his position, but with new oversight requirements and a formal reprimand in his file. Thursday morning brought the rescheduled board presentation. Isla healthy enough to stay with Mrs. Callahan, Marcus nervous enough that his hands shook slightly as he set up his laptop in the boardroom. 12 board members sat around an enormous table, their combined net worth probably exceeding small nations' GDP. Catherine sat at the head, her expression encouraging but not protective. This was Marcus's moment to prove himself without her intervention. He clicked to his first slide, took a breath, and began. Good morning. I'm Marcus Brennan, Facilities Operations Manager. 3 months ago, I was working night maintenance in this building. Today, I'm here to show you how 7 years of observation from that perspective has identified opportunities worth millions. The graph on the screen showed energy costs across all company facilities. Over the past decade, the upward trend stark and undeniable. This is what invisible inefficiency looks like. Small problems compounding over time because the people who noticed them didn't have authority to fix them, and the people with authority weren't close enough to operations to see the patterns. For 40 minutes, Marcus walked them through his data, showing correlations and projections backed by the Denver case study. He explained how building systems were like human bodies, ignore minor symptoms, and eventually they became crises requiring emergency intervention at 3 times the cost of prevention. The questions came fast and pointed. How did he ensure contractor quality? What metrics would track success? Why should they trust projections from someone with no formal engineering training? Patricia Hayes, a board member in her 70s with sharp eyes and sharper questions, leaned forward. Mr. Brennan, this is impressive work, but I have to ask, is this about building efficiency, or is this about proving Ms. Stone's unorthodox promotion was justified? The question was designed to corner him, to force him to either defend Catherine's judgment or his own merit. Marcus met Patricia's gaze steadily. Ma'am, with respect, whether my promotion was orthodox is irrelevant to whether this strategy saves money. The data stands on its own. The projections are conservative based on proven results. Judge the plan on merit, not on how I got the authority to present it. Patricia's stern expression cracked into something that might have been a smile. Fair answer. I moved to approve the strategy with a 6-month pilot program. Seconded, another board member called immediately. The vote was 11-1 with only one abstention from a board member known to be friends with Diane Harrington. Marcus had to work to keep his expression professional as relief and pride warred in his chest. He'd done it, proven himself to the people who controlled Summit's direction, done it on merit rather than on Catherine's protection. After the meeting, Patricia approached him privately. I voted against your initial promotion. Thought Catherine was letting personal feelings cloud her judgment. I was wrong. You've earned your place here. Gerald appeared next, his expression uncomfortable but sincere. Brennan, I owe you an apology. I opposed your promotion because I genuinely worried about qualifications. I was wrong to assume credentials mattered more than competence. And thank you for not making the procurement situation public. My kids don't know how close their father came to prison. Marcus extended his hand and they shook with something that wasn't quite friendship, but approached professional respect. We both learned. You learned competence transcends credentials. I learned paranoia isn't the same as due diligence. The following week brought Catherine to Marcus's office with an offer that should have felt like triumph but landed more like a dilemma. The board wants to create a new position, Director of Facilities and Operations, overseeing all company buildings. They want you. She handed him a folder. Salary $105,000, direct report to Catherine, comprehensive benefits. Everything Marcus had never dreamed of achieving. But there's a requirement. The position is based at our North Side headquarters 90 minutes from here. You'd need to relocate within 6 months for practical purposes. Marcus felt his excitement deflate like a punctured tire. North Side means new school for Isla, leaving Mrs. Callahan, uprooting everything we've built here. Catherine nodded, watching him carefully. Company would pay relocation costs. Better schools in that district, actually. But I understand if it's not worth the disruption. That evening, Marcus presented the offer to Isla, watching her face as she processed what it would mean. Her expression was complicated, adult concerns warring with 9-year-old fears. I'll go wherever you go, Dad, but I'll miss Mrs. Callahan, and my friends, and my school. Marcus thought about Catherine's father working himself to death, proving he mattered. Thought about his own father who died believing hard work counted for something. Thought about Isla in the hospital, her fever-bright eyes asking if the presentation was more important than she was. He'd already proven himself. The board approved his proposal. His team respected him. Gerald had apologized. He didn't need a director title to matter. Monday morning, he walked into Catherine's office with his decision. I'm turning it down. The director position. Promote someone else. Catherine's surprise was genuine. You're walking away from $105,000 in a director title. I'm choosing the life and I have built. choosing to be present for her middle school years instead of chasing titles, and choosing to stay where I can mentor people like I was people everyone overlooks because they don't have the right pedigree. He leaned forward, meeting Catherine's eyes. You asked me once what kind of man I wanted to be when my daughter looked at me. This is it. The man who knows which ladder actually matters. Success isn't climbing higher, it's knowing which ladder leads where you actually want to go. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. That's exactly why you should be director. But I respect your choice. She pulled out another document. Counteroffer. Regional director, new title, staying in this building. 92,000 salary. You oversee 3 regional facilities plus a mentorship program for facilities staff who want to advance. We create a pipeline from janitor to coordinator, proving talent exists everywhere if we're willing to look. Marcus felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. That I'll accept. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm Marcus had never experienced. Work that engaged his mind without consuming his life. Evenings with Isla helping with homework and hearing about her day. Weekends actually present instead of sleeping off night shifts. The mentorship program launched in early spring with 6 participants, janitors and technicians, who'd never imagined advancement was possible. Marcus taught them what he'd learned about seeing systems as wholes, about documenting observations, about having the courage to speak up when you notice problems. One of the first graduates was Joe Turner, a security guard who'd worked at Summit for 15 years, believing his station was fixed. After 3 months in Marcus's program, Joe was promoted to facilities coordinator, proving the pipeline worked. Warren Bennett's retirement party came on a Friday afternoon, the old supervisor looking both relieved and melancholy as colleagues gave speeches about his 28 years of service. He pulled Marcus aside before leaving. You proved me wrong. I told you to stay in your lane. You showed me lanes are arbitrary lines drawn by people invested in the status quo. He handed Marcus an old notebook, pages filled with maintenance observations spanning decades. I was you once, saw problems, documented them, but I never had the courage to speak up. Don't waste these, use them. The memorial plaque appeared in Summit's main lobby on a Monday morning, bronze and permanent. Marcus brought Isla to see it during lunch. In memory of James Stone, custodian, and William Brennan, HVAC technician, who taught us dignity isn't found in titles but in how we treat each other. Isla read it twice, then looked up at her father with shining eyes. Grandpa would be proud of you, Dad. I think he'd be proud of both of us, Bug. 6 months after his promotion, Marcus was walking through the building after hours when he encountered a new night janitor. Maria Jennings, single mother of 2, working the same shift Marcus had once walked. She recognized him from company photos. Mr. Brennan, I heard you used to do this job. 7 years. Best education I ever got. Maria hesitated, hope and fear warring in her expression. Do you think someone like me could ever, is it possible to move up, lead? Absolutely. That's what we do now. Here. He handed her his card. Call me Monday. We'll talk about your goals. Driving home that evening, Marcus passed Summit's building lit against the darkening sky and thought about the journey from invisible janitor to visible leader. About Catherine, whose father had worked himself to death, finding in Marcus an echo of what William Brennan had been. About Isla, who'd believed something good would happen and had been proven right in ways neither of them had imagined. About the simple truth that seeing others started with being willing to be seen yourself. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Dinner this weekend, you, me, and Isla, my treat. Marcus smiled, typing back, we'd love that. The story that began with a drunk CEO and a janitor who chose kindness was ending not with dramatic transformation, but with something quieter and more profound. A life built on competence and character. A daughter who believed her father could be anything. A woman who'd been alone for years finding someone who saw past the CEO to the person beneath. And a simple understanding that when you help someone, everyone else ignored you, don't just change their life. You change what's possible. Marcus pulled into his apartment complex, climbed the familiar stairs, opened the door to find Isla at the kitchen table with homework and Mrs. Callahan making dinner. His family chosen and blood the people who mattered more than any title or salary. Isla looked up as he entered. How was work, Dad? Good, Bug. Helped someone today who needed it, just like someone once helped me. That's what you're supposed to do. Marcus kissed the top of her head, grateful for her wisdom for this life they'd built together from the rubble of abandonment and hardship. Yeah, sweetheart, that's exactly what you're supposed to do.